And we're live.
Welcome to the Transformational CFO, a forum presented by Williams Marston,
where we will explore innovative strategies that influential CFOs and other finance leaders deploy as they navigate critical transitions and drive transformations in these challenging times.
Welcome to the Transformational CFO. I'm Sanjay Ramaswamy, CEO of Williams Marston, and will be hosting today's episode. I'm excited to have this conversation with Steve Howe, retired chairman and managing partner of Ernst & Young LLP. During his 35-year career at EY, Steve was the U.S. chairman and managing partner, the Americas managing partner. He served 12 years on EY's global executive board, promoting client service and diversity. And now he serves on public company boards, including Royal Caribbean, on the board of Lazard, the Peterson Institute, and the Liberty Science Center as well. He was formerly also on the board of Carnegie Hall. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sanjay. Good morning to you.
Excellent. Well, glad to have you on. Let me start with a sort of a broad question. You, as I remember, led EY through a period of growth and expansion post the financial crisis. What observations do you have to share on what worked well for the Big Four accounting firms, EY in particular? And then when you look to the future of the Big Four, there's a lot of things in the news that I'm sure you keep up with. What do you see for the future of the Big Four accounting firms?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there to start.
Yeah.
Certainly I'll get to the financial crisis, but I think often it is said that crises come and go, and a crisis is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. That was something that was embedded in me at that time, and I remember it well that we had to certainly manage through it, but also view it as an opportunity. And I think many companies saw that in working through the pandemic as well in more recent times. But for me, in the financial crisis, one thing that was paramount was communication. We're a people business, and I think you just can't communicate enough when you're going through challenging times. And so I think people, our people needed to be tapped in, needed to hear from leadership, needed to hear from me and others. And we certainly focused on continuous and comprehensive communication. And then, very focused planning and execution, not just how do we navigate with our people, but how are we going to work through the challenges, serve our clients effectively, remembering that they too were going through this crisis. It's a crisis for us. It's a crisis for our clients. And we had to be very nimble. We had to be comfortable with change, and we had to be reliable partners for our clients. They were looking for trust, reliability, support, and that was all that we were trying to deliver. I think the bedrock of professional services is being that trusted provider for your clients. So when you talk about the future and looking to the future, lots of things change. But, I would say to anybody in professional services now, that piece really doesn't change. I think
Right.
companies are going to look, they have lots of options out there. And who do they really trust? Who's going to help them bring their best and help them navigate through the challenges that are in front of them? I think that will remain the constant.
Terrific. So, Steve, now looking forward, in professional services, there's the role of private equity investment in accounting services. Any sort of reaction from you as someone who's led a large Big Four organization, good, bad, indifferent?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense, both sides. I think that professional services firms have a need for capital to grow. Private equity businesses, I think, are looking for growth opportunities and, investments. I think that it's a matchup that makes a lot of sense and I think provides an opportunity for both sides. And that capital can be deployed in bringing in new skill sets, in transactions. And I think that the better the partnership between the PE organization and the professional services firm, the better the opportunities will be. But I see that trend continuing, Sanjay. It makes a lot of sense, and I'm not surprised that private equity sees the services world as a world of opportunity.
Right. Let's move to the regulatory changes. There's, obviously some post-crisis and also maybe perhaps with over time and shifting administrations and viewpoints, you get regulatory changes, which is a very important part of what affects the Big Four. What's your take on what has transpired so far and any sort of indications on what to expect in the future?
I think the regulatory world is really important to have your focus on in professional services, both for your own business, where it's regulated, where it's not, and for your clients' businesses. And frankly, regulation can create opportunity for professional services firms. So, what are companies required to deal with? I think that professional services firms need to be engaged with regulators. They need to have relationships and recognize also, as you noted, that regulation is going to change. It can accelerate, it can decelerate, it can create problems, it can create opportunities. What will change is that degree of regulation,
Right.
but what won't change is the importance of regulation and staying focused on that.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And the last one, which we're all caught up in now, and I'm sure you're seeing it in your board roles as well, is the role and the potential of AI to, some say, transform professional services, right? Clearly, it's going to have an impact. What are you hearing? What sort of lessons would you share with the listeners?
Wow, we could spend an hour on this, Sanjay. I think it really is and will continue to be a red hot topic, I think, for all companies. And so, for a professional services firm, how will you deploy AI in your businesses? And how will you help your clients deploy AI? And what I'm seeing across the market, every business, every sector needs to be focused on AI. And I think it's a top-down focus that an organization needs to have, as well as a bottoms-up. Within business units, people are actually using tools. This is going to continue to move forward. It's going to accelerate in its speed. And so wading in now is important. I think some of your younger people will see an opportunity to get to a higher level faster, to
Right.
use the tools to take on the benefits of AI and bring to your clients better advice, better answers, better solutions. And the faster I think people get comfortable with using the tools and working with AI and getting on this wave that's not going to stop anytime soon, I think the better they will be individually and the better you will be as an organization.
Thank you, Steve. Let me turn to your board roles now. And let me start with, I think, what is a really fascinating situation. As I remember, you were on the board of Royal Caribbean when COVID hit. And I think it's an understatement to say that the cruise industry was hit hard uh, during those years. How did the board and the management team navigate that situation? And, what stands out to you about your response to that crisis?
Well, I'll long remember those days, Sanjay. A crisis often happens without a whole lot of warning.
Right.
And, that was certainly one. And Royal Caribbean, I had joined the board in 2019 and things were going along quite smoothly. The company was doing great, navigating its businesses, and all of a sudden, everything changed and changed dramatically. And the pandemic affected all businesses, but certainly the cruise business had to be on the higher end of the challenges. It was largely sidelined. We largely were out of business for almost a year and a half. And so that created substantial challenges. First of all, I would say the management team working with the board, the first thing that comes to mind is we didn't panic. There was no panic. There was, all right, let's think about the situation. And this is going to require a great deal of focus, working together, decision making. working with our partners. You really go to, who do you trust? Who can we lean on? Who's going to help us navigate through these extremely challenging times? You have to set your priorities. I mean, some things become crucial, other things become less important, and a sense of those priorities and how you're going to deal through it. And then you have to make some tough decisions. What are we going to focus on? And keeping in mind both the short term, literally staying alive, and the long term, that ultimately, this will pass. And where do we want to be when we come out of this thing? And so that's really a multivariable equation when you think about it. It was intense. When I look back on it, I think the management team, with just the oversight and advice of the board, navigated exceptionally well through this. And now you look at Royal Caribbean, really in a commanding position in the sector and really doing extremely well. And I think the investor world has seen that, and seen that quite clearly. And some of those decisions, what to do with ships. Do you really put them on ice, or do you keep them in some sort of warm state? There is a big financial commitment to do that, to think about what to do with your people, what investments to make, what investments to not make. How do we handle the balance sheet? Obviously, I think we went through a survival period with bankers and lenders. The company has now reemerged and back to investment grade. That was a difficult course to navigate. Recognizing, I think Royal Caribbean prides itself on innovation. And so you can't stop innovating just because this challenge, this huge cloud has arrived. And so continuing to embrace, endorse innovation, communicate effectively. As I said about the financial crisis, communication with your people and with your stakeholders during this crisis was paramount as well. So all of that was a huge set of challenges, but one that the company, I think, feels very good about how it navigated. And I think today the results and the brand show the results of that excellence.
Yeah, and I think you were telling me there's a case study written about it, right? That maybe the readers can access. Is that public?
Yeah. Harvard Business School has done a case study on this, and I think it's good recognition of what an outstanding job that the management team at Royal Caribbean did to navigate through this crisis. And, you've mentioned the financial crisis and now the pandemic, and I think there are some common issues. I think it's great that these learnings can be codified and people can think about them, because we will no doubt encounter more crises as we move forward.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. So when you come out of the crisis, let's say at Royal Caribbean, did you guys get together and say, well, we're going to make a few changes so that we're better prepared for the next time? Or was it like, you know what? It was an unforeseen event. We responded as well as we could, and now it's business as, usual, and we just move on.
I think the company is constantly learning from its past and embedding that into its future. But one of the great things to see here was that how decisive management was being during the crisis, and made some decisions that were bold, that were courageous, and that really have paid off in terms of investments. You look at, they made a lot of investments and now kind of lead the industry in private islands, for example, and moving ahead with some of those plans, in the innovation that they have on their ships, and in what they were planning to do in shipbuilding, and what they wanted to do with technology, and how they wanted to position the brand. And so it was keep moving, recognize that, yes, the day to day, we're going to have to work hard to get through this, but we will get through this, and we want to be strong when we come sailing out of it.
Yeah, very fascinating. This podcast is aimed at CFOs. And I think at the time of the crisis, the current CEO at Royal Caribbean was the CFO, right? So any advice you have from board role observing CFOs, and any advice you'd give to CFOs aspire to become CEOs on lessons to learn?
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right, and it's a good point. So the current CEO is Jason Liberty. He succeeded the longtime CEO, Richard Fain, who was really founder slash CEO and was at the helm for almost 30 years. And it was something, again, that we were focused on. We knew that we were moving towards that succession point. There were other candidates internally. Royal Caribbean is blessed with a really strong management team. So we actually were thinking about and moving towards succession during the financial crisis as well, and ended up selecting Jason and positioning him effectively as he's now has more than 2 years under his belt as the CEO. He actually joined Royal Caribbean from professional services and came in as the head of internal audit into a position where he was able to see a lot of the business and become somebody who was finding and implementing solutions across various of its challenges. They made him the CFO, where he really became the partner to the CEO. The two of them worked very closely together. We gave him more responsibility as he grew in that role so that he took on some business responsibility in addition to his finance. He oversaw one of the brands. He took on responsibility for supply chain. He worked with a lot of the vendors. And so these became important experiences for him. And that's one thing I think CFOs should constantly keep in focus and work with their senior management about their own development, both in the finance function and how they relate with other functions and how they can grow in that role. And I think that his growth as CFO positioned him extremely well to become the highly effective CEO he is today.
Yeah, terrific story there. So now you're also on the board of Lazard, very different industry from Royal Caribbean. What's different there, and what observations do you have from your time on the board there?
Well, it's certainly a very different industry. Some of the things are not too different. Some of the things we've talked about now, focus on your people, focus on AI. I think
Right, right.
Lazard is doing a terrific job of recognizing that this is not a blip. This is a trend that will continue. How do we embrace AI, make sure our people are embracing AI, bring our clients even better advice, financial advice than we have historically, infusing AI into how we do business. But it's certainly a different business as well. It's not as capital intensive as Royal Caribbean, which is building massive ships and investing in private islands. I would say Lazard's closer to professional services, and it's really a people business, and crucial to have that people model going as well as it can possibly go in terms of, again, attracting and retaining the best, the learning that you provide your people, the culture that they feel a part of, and that helps them invest in their careers. I think communication's very important. The CEO of Lazard is Peter Orsag. He's a very effective communicator internally and externally, and their reputation has been on the rise. And, it's really a company on the move, also very global.
Mm.
Another of the topics you've raised this morning, they are very focused on their business. Their heritage is from France as well as the US and the UK and around the world. And so, again, it's got commonality in its corporate culture, but it's got differences as well in terms of how do you be truly one of the best financial advisors in France and across Europe, as well as in the United States. And again, they want to be the trusted provider to succeed on their growth journey. Lazard wants to be their advisor and be the one they trust to help navigate and make those right choices.
Thank you, Steve, for your reflections from your board roles. And now, looking at reflections on leadership advice from your career, if you were to boil down your leadership philosophy from all your years of experience, both running professional services, serving on board roles, into a few principles, what would you share with our listeners?
I think as a leader, you need to lay out a clear vision and direction for the organization, and you need to communicate it very effectively. And I've mentioned communication several times, and I don't think it can be overstated, the importance of communicating effectively, and you communicate through different mechanisms, but clarity and communication is really important. I also believe in, particularly in professional services, but also all businesses, empowerment and accountability. I think you need to, through the talent agenda, I'm a big believer in identifying high performers, rewarding them, but also giving them more responsibility, empowering them, but holding them accountable. I think it's one thing to have good, clear strategic vision, but underneath that is really a lot of hard work to really execute your agenda in a highly effective way. And that requires great discipline. It requires metrics and all of that for me done with integrity. I think people are watching their leaders and certainly how smart you are, how well you execute, how effectively you communicate. They also, I think, will see, is this a leader that I am really comfortable and excited about getting behind and staying behind? And I think the way you operate with integrity is important to that.
That's very helpful, Steve. Great lessons, not just for professional services, as you've said, but across industries. Let's translate that to young professionals. As you mentioned, we recruit a lot of young folks. Several of them actually have started in audit and they're looking to grow their careers. They're also wondering how much they should build their technical chops, what sort of experiences would position them well. You've mentored quite a few people in your career. What advice would you share to younger finance professionals?
Well, it's a great question, and I do think you mentioned the technical requirements, the technical chops, if you will. And I do think that's important. Wherever you start, or whatever your area of responsibility, there are certain core requirements. And I think getting those right, those are table stakes, I think. You do need to be able to deliver in your area of expertise. And so that requires, do the training, learning on the job, learning from people around you and who are supervising you, and getting those core requirements, the technical stakes nailed down, I think is important. I would not overlook that. I think working hard sounds simple, but I watch people get ahead because they work harder. And that doesn't always mean longer, but understanding what they need to accomplish, working hard to deliver that. And then probably the third thing I'd mention is back to building trusted relationships, both inside and outside the organization. And you want to be somebody that your management team is going to ask for on the next assignment, wants you to be part of the team, trusts that you will be an effective team member, will work hard, will help deliver an outstanding product to your clients. And then outside those same relationships with your clients, every project is an opportunity for the next project, and building, not only delivering excellence in terms of your service, but also positioning the firm for the next project down the road because they trust you, they believe that you deliver an outstanding product, and relationships are important there as well.
Excellent. Excellent. Steve, great conversation. We've covered a lot of ground. But before I let you go, we have this one final question that we ask of all our guests. And that is, can you tell us about the best piece of advice you ever received and who the person is who gave that advice to you?
Wow, that's a great question. I guess, first there's a piece of general advice that I heard from so many, and it was burned into me, and that is to be prepared no matter what you do. And so I think people, you look at your upcoming week, you look at, your day, your next meeting, and I think people who are really thoroughly prepared are going to outperform. And it sounds simple, but I've watched this over and over again. And so this is advice: be prepared, be as prepared as you can be. Things won't play out exactly as expected, but be prepared for the expected. It'll also help you in terms of dealing with the unexpected. So preparation is key. I'll name somebody, and that is, my father, who is long past, but as I was moving up in the business world, he had some good advice for me. And I remember two pieces in particular I mentioned earlier: in integrity. Just never lose sight of the importance of integrity. Don't be driven by money. Be driven by doing the right thing. Your financial success will take care of itself if your principles are in the right place and you're doing the right thing. And you see sometimes people make mistakes when they're driven by truly a financial motivation only and not a set of principles and doing the right thing. And the other thing he said to me, which I found humorous at the time, and sometimes I look back on it, but when I took on more leadership responsibility, I first became the head of the financial services business. He said to me, "Steve, there's three folks you don't want to fight with. And one is the regulator, two is the media, and three is your mother. And so keep those things in mind. I think you're going to be just okay." And those are not bad principles to remember as well.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you, Steve. Fantastic conversation. I think lessons that will be super valuable for all our listeners. So thanks again, Steve. Appreciate you taking the time this morning to talk to us.
Thank you, Sanjay. Good luck to you and Williams and Marston.
Thank you for joining us today on the Transformational CFO podcast, where we explore the evolving role of the CFO and the strategies for a successful path forward.
We look forward to having you join our next podcast as we continue the conversation with inspirational finance leaders.
The views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect WilliamsMarston's views. It does not constitute accounting, tax, valuation, or other professional advice or services by Williams Marston, and it may not be relied upon for any purpose. This podcast may not be reproduced or republished in whole or in part without the express written consent of Williams Marston.